Hello, I'm Liz Tassone with the Caring Matters webcast, and I'm here today with Betsy Needels. She's a social worker with Hospice of the Bluegrass, and this is part 2 of a series on how to effectively communicate with healthcare professionals. In the first one, we talked about preparing for that doctor's visit, and now we're going to go into making the most of the visit while you're actually there. So, Betsy, during the visit itself, what's the best way to have all your questions answered?
Well, we talked in the previous session a little bit about being prepared and having your concerns written down. Taking notes is a wonderful thing to do, and it can be really helpful to have somebody with you, even if you're going to the doctor, even just for yourself. To have somebody with you can be really helpful because if you're the patient, your mind is thinking about all these different things, and you may be getting news that may or may not be good news, and so to have somebody who can be jotting things down while you're thinking and distracted by other things can be really helpful. The other thing is a lot of caregivers find they need a little extra time. The average that most recently in a study that said the time that you get with the doctor is less than 8 minutes. Wow. So this is all about trying to figure out how can you get the most out of those 8 minutes. But clearly, if you know that you are really going to need a lot of extra time and you have a lot of questions, as you figured out by your pre-planning process, that it's a great idea to call ahead when you're making the appointment and just let the receptionist know that you do have a lot of questions and could you be given a time slot, just so they have a heads up that you may need a little extra time. As either at the beginning of the appointment, if they can't schedule it that day, it's okay to schedule. A lot of doctors' offices will let a caregiver schedule a separate consultation time with or without the patient, without whoever the care receiver is. So that's also a wonderful thing to be able to do.
One of the things I've heard caregivers voice is that they may take their loved one to the doctor, and they feel like while they're in the doctor's office, mom or dad is not as upfront with the doctor during that visit, and yet they don't want to be confrontational during that visit.
Sure.
Is it possible for a caregiver to kind of give heads up to the doctor prior to meeting, and how might that have to happen?
I think absolutely that's a great idea to do, and that can happen either by when you schedule the appointment, seeing if you can leave a message for the doctor or speak to the doctor before the appointment. There's so many sensitive subjects that come up about incontinence issues or hearing loss or things that care receivers don't readily want to discuss in front of their caregiver.
A little bit embarrassing.
That are embarrassing,
yeah.
Right. And so either scheduling a separate consultation appointment, which many physicians are willing to do, or just scheduling ahead of time, just saying, can I speak with the doctor privately for 5 minutes before the exam or 5 minutes after the exam, privately, so that they have some idea.
And doctors usually are not resistant to that?
In my experience, when I have talked to caregivers, they have not been.
Okay.
But the other thing I want to add is that there are many gifted specialists and physicians, and if at any point you are feeling uncomfortable as a caregiver or as a patient with your physician, or you don't feel like you've gotten adequate time, express that to the doctor's office and try to resolve that in any way you can. But it's also okay to seek second opinions. It's okay to get referrals to another physician. If you know other family members or friends who've been very satisfied, usually go by those kind of recommendations too.
Okay. I know with the new HIPAA laws that are, well, they're not new anymore, but HIPAA laws restrict the doctor in actually talking to someone else about a patient unless permission has been granted. Is that correct?
That's correct. And as part of the patient file that we talked about, it's really wonderful. Make sure your doctor's office has all of the copies of power of attorney forms, living wills, healthcare surrogate designations, any of those legal documents that will allow them to talk to you as the caregiver. Most doctors' offices now have release forms that they'll have you sign that say that you are permitted to receive information too. So it's a good idea to make sure all those are signed and that they have copies of all your legal documents.
By coincidence, I was at the doctor this week, and the first form that I filled out gave me a place to write in my husband's name as someone my physician or the doctor's office could talk to about results or anything about my file, and I wrote in his name. So I thought about this upcoming talk and just wanted to bring that up, that the patient has the permission, can grant the permission for this caregiver to talk to the doctor,
Right.
or let the doctor talk to them, because I think the caregiver can always talk to the doctor, but the doctor can't always talk
Can't
back
always release the information
legally unless there is
Right.
permission granted. So you just
Right.
want to make sure that that's something that's done.
And
in
it's important to
advance.
do it ahead of time, because you certainly don't want to find out in the emergency room that the physician's not going to share information. So you want to have all of those things prepared.
Okay, and do they tend to do that in emergency rooms? Allow someone right then and there to talk with someone?
Generally they do, but obviously it's always good to have, if you've got your file with you with all the power of attorney or legal documents, that's going to help too.
Okay, very good. So you've just had a doctor's appointment, you've got your questions answered. Is there anything else we need to know about that actual visit that would help us?
One of the biggest things that I try to stress is that being a good communicator really begins with being a good listener. And I don't think people think about that as often. And so just learning to try to ease the distractions sometimes before you even go into the appointment, try to clear your mind, can help you be a good listener when you're in there. And everybody has different learning styles, so again, it's good to have somebody with you, an extra person. A lot of caregivers themselves have hearing difficulties, or we have a lot of people out there who aren't able to read. And so, have somebody with you who can help you interpret. Of course, there's a lot of language barriers. Physicians get into speaking in their own language that they're used to talking to other doctors and nurses in, and it's okay to slow them down, to ask them to repeat that, or to make it in more layman's terms.
Right.
So that's a
Right.
good idea to do.
And is it a good idea that as you're sitting there with the doctor, if you're with your loved one and you're the caregiver, to kind of recap in front of the doctor so that you're all on board with what's been said and what the plan of action is?
Absolutely, and that's part of active listening that we talk a lot in the workshop about, is being able to repeat back what you've heard, because that can clarify a lot of misunderstandings. Just to say, okay, Dr. Smith, what I understand I'm supposed to do is this, this, and this, and the part that you're going to follow up with is this, this, and this. That gives the doctor an opportunity to know what you've heard, what you've understood, and they can help clarify if you've missed anything.
Okay. And that might be the time where you take notes as well, to just write it down so that you're writing down and going back over your own
Right.
notes in front of them to make sure that you've done this correctly.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes you leave there and you're like, oh, what did he say? What was this about? And
Right.
you don't always
And
remember.
as much as you think you're focused in that appointment, as soon as you leave, we're all just naturally inclined, when we're under stress, to forget details. And so even if you think you've got the sharpest memory in the world, it's still a good idea to take notes and write that down, to be able to recap with the physician.
Okay. Is there anything else you can think of that we haven't touched upon for this particular topic in terms of the end of the visit, or?
The only other couple tidbits I would add is, as caregivers, know what your limits are in terms of what things you are or aren't able to do with your loved one, and make sure you can clearly convey that to the doctor. You don't want them to give some instruction to take mom's blood pressure every morning if you've got to be at work every morning and that's not feasible for you. So just to know what your limits are, know the policies of the doctor's offices in terms of cancellations. There's probably nothing that frustrates them more is when people get upset about cancellation fees or things. So be familiar with the policies at your individual doctor's office, and just remember that there's no stupid questions. It is okay to ask away, make long lists of whatever your questions are. You are entitled to have answers to those.
Okay, that's a really good point. And I see you've also written be appreciative.
And to be appreciative, a little thank you here and there goes a very long way. And I think that was when the National Family Caregiver Association did the research and interviewed a lot of healthcare professionals. That was one of the things they really felt was that they were underappreciated. And so even just throwing in, I appreciate the extra time you spent with me, can be really helpful in terms of getting that need met on the next visit.
Good point. Good point. Well,
So,
thank you so much,
thank you.
Betsy. This was wonderful information. I just want to close with, again, thanking our sponsors to the Caring Matters website, and that's Healthcare by Blackstone, Vitas Hospice, Landfair Retirement Community, Hillebrand Home Health, Independent U, Lifespan, and Family Bridges Home Care. I'm Liz Tassone, and I want to thank you for joining us today, and always remember that caring matters.